I think what we do now is I want to talk about some of the specific players, but obviously let's talk about them over the whole series. Right, the obvious name I'm going to go to, and it's not to diss him, it's not even supposed to be a dunk. Like, I actually think within context, this was about the best he could have done for the way the game was caught. Right, let's do the Flakked conversation. Here's how it starts, Dom. Miss me every fan on Twitter going, he was still doing all right damage, he was doing okay. The whole game was set up as though he was Uzi I, motherfucker. He was supposed to be the MVP of this series if they win. That is how they set the game up. As you said, in game 2, that's why I hate the Lissandra. It's not that Caps can't play. It's not they couldn't play to win. He can't play to win if he's got fucking Flakked as his ADC on a carry champ, mate. That ain't happening. And so, in general, this series is almost like they came in thinking like G2 came in thinking we'll be the ones who do like the different draft, and they'll never expect us to play through bots or watch this. And Nate, it was fucking whack. Like, they gave him 3 dude, he even got Rogue even gave him the Zeri in the last game. Just like, you know what, motherfucker? Take the most OP ADC in the game and see if you can do anything. You can't, we'll take the trophy. Like, it's not I'm hating on Flakked, I'm actually hating on G2 in a way. The coaches, I don't know why they put him in this position. Because if you're us and we've spent the whole year pointing out, like, obviously people like Upset and Comp and these guys are way better than him. All the haters are like, no, but he does his job in the top. Yeah, you didn't let him do his job this time. You actually, what you did basically is you threw him in the deep end when he's not a really good swimmer and he drowned.
Well, I mean, he's
just peddled water, whatever. He is Ghost from Damn One back in the day, yeah.
He's Ghost. That's how you want to play with him. You want him to neutralize the lane. You want to give him key abilities in team fights. You don't want him to have to make like the micro decisions in the fight where it's like, how many like autos am I going to get off here? Or like, can I actually go forward? Like, did they use enough cooldowns? Like, that's what makes a super elite AD carry. When you look at somebody like Viper, you look at somebody like Ruler right now, the ability for their like brains or their cognitive ability to just look at every single skill shot and be able to like time, like they'll see 5 at the same time and they'll just instantly be like, okay, those 5 are down. It's like, and what's the next one? And then they'll see, oh, this 6th one just came in and now I can go forward and just like flash it to a team fight and take it over. They're so good at having that ability. And that's something that if you're a newer player, it's just difficult, you know, to under pressure, be able to find these openings is really tough.
Oh, he's still a rookie, let's be real. It's his first year in LEC. That's also why I thought it was a bit rough, just this draft in general, mate, because if there's one player out, he's going to obviously be gapped by. You said it earlier, it's going to be ADC. That goes without saying, mate.
Yeah, I mean, AD carry and support. I mean, I feel like in this series, Targamas was also, you know, worse than Trimby. I think Trimby played extremely well. And part of it is, yeah, they're just not great in lane. Like, you give them lanes. I mean, it's not like so Renata is not supposed to be good into Soraka, but it's mainly just like the concept of the champions. Like, you can kill this lane. Like, you are playing Draven Renata. If you get a good flash handshake onto somebody, you can try to like force sums, you can like play aggressively. It feels like G2 just doesn't do that. You know, like the way that they've gotten by is, hey, just don't lose bot, be stable, and then group up with the team and we'll win. That's been, or like Targamas will go roam and Flakked just don't die. You know, like that's how they want to play
There was no roam timings in any of these games because it was that they were never fucking up in lane where they don't like they're gonna. He never could. Everyone says like I agree when he's on roam, he looks like one of the great supports in the future. Like he's gonna have a great career, but he can never be unleashed. That's the thing people are forgetting, Dom, from back in season 9. The reason season 9 was so interesting was like you had to unlock the support to then take over and help the mid and then open the whole map. Like if you couldn't ever get them out of lane, they would. Then having Hillside doesn't help. He's just stuck in lane, isn't he?
I mean, I would just say that like it's also just the champions that you're playing. You're playing Karma. Like, what did he play? He played a game of Karma, a game of Renata, and a game of Soraka. Like, what are you roaming? What are you doing if you're trying to roam on those champions? So it's like
true.
That's why I thought that an angle could have been pull out like a Seraphine Nautilus. You know, pull out something to unleash the support. Have your support move around the map. Try to make plays because that's what G2's strong at. Ban out the key champions that you think are going to make this impossible. So ban out if you think Yuumi makes this impossible, ban it out. If you think Lulu makes it impossible, ban it out. That's fine. And just like allow yourselves to play with the same identity that you did in the last series, because that's when G2 looked their best, right? Neutralize bot lane. Doesn't matter what happens on the other like side of the map. You know, you'll just show up in team fights, cast your Seraphine ult, press W, help everyone else, and you'll win just like that. So for me, it just seemed like by the last game, I mean, they just didn't even know who they were anymore. It's like, okay, so we have this like Ahri pick, okay, but then we have a Fiora, okay, so we have pretty weak team fights, but we also like don't have really winning lane from the mid lane because you're playing Ahri into Azir. And then we have like a Soraka on our team. So like the Soraka wants to get into the team fights, but that's not even what it just seemed like it was all over the place. They just didn't know what to do anymore. They completely collapsed in this. So, I mean, I would say that, I don't know if I would say G2 choked the series because it seemed like Rogue just played well. It felt like G2 just expected Rogue to choke, honestly. They kind of bought into the narratives of, oh, this is like Rogue can't play when it matters. We'll just play solid. And if we play solid, we'll win because we're better.
Here's the thing, though. That's not actually as silly as when you're saying it as you might think. Because here's the thing. If people don't know, this is aged fucking so well. But I've always said the reason I don't totally give up on Rogue, not that I said did win, but I don't give up on the idea. You notice I always argue the idea that like regular season games matter for something. It shows something about them as a team. Like if they can ever just play like that in the playoff, blah, blah, blah. Because everyone tries to do that thing of like, who cares about regular season? Like, I'm sorry. If you're like the greatest player of all time, you don't just have whack regular seasons all the time and then only win in the playoffs. That doesn't exist. The greatest of all time is pretty good in more, probably the best player in the playoffs, in the regular season and the playoffs. That's what Michael Jordan's like, mate. He just take 30 games off and just dick around and then come back. He just dominates you every time he can. Yeah. So to me, what that
35 points a game for a season.
So to me, like what that suggests is Rogue can do it when there's no pressure. Now, obviously, look, if you want to talk about the GOATs, that's not worth too much, mate. You have to eventually do it in the playoffs. But to me, it was always like, they're going to break through eventually if they keep playing like this. If they keep having these good splits, if they keep having these good players, like sooner or later, people are going to fix things are going to tweak. And so if you don't know the analogy in Counter-Strike, people don't, it's probably the craziest story of all time. Imagine this analogy. I'll give you the league analogy. Imagine those years where Rocks Tigers used to be first every LCK split, and then they only won the one time where Score and KT took credit of SKT for them. They never had to beat SKT, and then they won one time ever, didn't win Worlds, that's it. That's all they got out of it. They got like basically one LCK title, and that's kind of whack because they could have been one of the greatest teams of all time. Now imagine they never broke up though, Dom. Imagine they'd played for like 3 more years with the same lineup, and suddenly in the next years, they break through a couple of times and they win. And then you know what? Next time they win Worlds 2 years later. And by the end of it, right, they've made their dynasty so that like the seconds and are pretty good because they've also got the firsts and all the championships as well. And they would then, for real, they could have been like a contender for like greatest team of all time. That happened in Counter-Strike. The core of this team that was Astralis used to be the team that if it wasn't the big tournament, they would win over all the other teams. But when it was, because essentially we don't have leagues, we have tournaments instead of the circuit. But when it would be the big tournament with the big money and the major, like all the pressure, they were like guaranteed to lose. In fact, they could even occasionally lose to a much worse team, but and obviously their rivals would beat them. Now, what was insane about that was every fan can only see what you are now because they just like watch what's on the screen and see the score. So they used to go like, they'll never win, and I was always like, bro, they're this close. Like, imagine they ever activate in that way, it's over. And that is actually what happened. They got like a slightly different set of players but they essentially became the greatest team of all time and created like the most insane Counter-Strike dynasty probably ever in history. Now, I'm not saying Rogue is going to do that, but I do, by the way, as an interesting thing about this final, think this does imply that they're in the mix for the next 2 titles if they keep the same lineup, and they're going to certainly be a strong team. And it does feel like the way that they won maybe broke some of the issues that they had. And I think the key thing for me overall is this. This is sort of what I've always wanted them to have, which is you could still play loads of games with like the boring style and just pick the standard pick. That's fine. That's what wins you loads of best of ones. But they never had this 5th gear. They never had drafts like game 1 and game 2 with this series and playing like game 2, mate. This is where you've got to have that extra notch, and that's what I've seen change in Rogue. Like, I think this finals especially was like the fucking birth of a potentially great team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also they didn't have to play under the same pressure they normally have to play under. I think that that's like actually a huge thing because people will try to make it seem like, oh, it's a finals, every finals is equal. But there's a difference between going in as a massive favorite where you're just expected to win and going in like they did recently. And if you hear everyone's counting them out, right? Like, so pretty much like they don't have, I mean, if Rogue lost this, I wouldn't have said they choked because they didn't have a good regular season.
The reason I got those odds was because not only did the odds makers set it, but then obviously everyone put all their money on G2 and Fnatic. That's how I got the dude. Even Fnatic, I got like 2.6 or something on Rogue. That's impossible. How could it be that? But it was. Everyone thought Rogue had chokers. Fnatic at least has some clutch play. Yeah, the odds was. No one. The money tells you no one's ever believed in Rogue less ever. Normally they're like, oh, but even if they're underdog, Dom, they'd be like, you know, the 40-60 underdog, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Rogue in general, when you look at the team, like, look, I mean, people were memeing it the whole time. It's like, you can't choke if you're bad. You can't choke if you're actually losing the regular season.
Yeah.
So it's like they almost relieve their pressure by not not being front runners. Every single other time they'd been a front runner for the most of the split. Like they're number one in regular season. They're expected to do well. I mean, the series versus Mad, the first best of 5 they played, they were expected to win that by most people's estimation. So I think that's something that people are missing, or even the players seem like they're missing it.
Yes.
From a lot of like the interviews and stuff. Like I hear like these weird things where, like, I mean, Odo had the tweet or the interview where he's like, oh, like, how come when we lose, we're chokers, and when we beat Fnatic are not chokers? It's like, well, because Fnatic, like, no one believe, like, in order to be a choker, you need to actually have people believe in you. And when Fnatic is like barely making fucking playoffs, they're not expected to win. They're not expected to actually do well. Whereas like when Rogue is consistently like first place, then you have expectations that they're going to perform. And it's not even just the standings and stuff like that. It's the actual gameplay. Like when Rogue lost that final in spring, they didn't play like themselves at all. It wasn't like G2 just played amazing and Rogue played at their best, but G2 was just better. It was like G2 played well and Rogue just made so many uncharacteristic mistakes. Like whenever the tide shifted at all into their favor, they would like instantly lose. They would just make a bad play and instantly lose. They're the game right there. So for me, it's just, I mean, Rogue obviously won. I don't know if they if I view it as like, oh, they overcame choking. I think that they actually just played with a lot less pressure than they normally put on themselves. Like maybe they're a team that is better at not being front runners. Like maybe they should change the way that they scrim, because they actually were losing a ton of scrims beforehand. If you listen to like what Odo said,
20% win rate, right?
20% win rate. I actually heard it was worse than that. Maybe I have bad information. I heard that they won. Let me actually check.
I think I just saw a headline that said that. So
let me check real quick.
I think it was even worse. I think it was like 20% since like week 8 of the split, or some mental stat like that. There was some line someone had.
So I heard that they were 7 wins and 67 losses in scrims.
Okay.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.